Welcome back. Today we're going to be testing out this dual fuel generator from Champion. And if you guys haven't been here before, make sure to subscribe right down there so you don't miss any more of my other content. So this is a brand new generator. We're going to run through the full setup procedure on this, and then we're going to basically take it outside to check its empty weight. And then we're also going to do a break-in procedure as well. A lot of people aren't doing that, so we want to make sure we do break it in at least a little bit by varying its loads and maybe doing some heat cycles as well. And then we'll go on and do the full test of it. And basically we're going to run a dB test, and we're going to check sound levels with propane and gasoline. And then we'll do a full load test to see how much power we can really draw out of this thing before it shuts down on propane and gasoline. All right, let's get started. All right, we'll take a quick look at the specs here, and you can see on the right side with gasoline, that's kind of all our higher numbers at 3,400 starting watts, 3,100 running, and then our amps is a peak of 28.3-ish, and then almost 26 amps for running, and then of course this is 120 volts, it's 60 hertz, and then our weight is more likely a claimed weight with no battery, no oil, and no fuel. When we measure it, it's going to have the battery in it, and it's also going to have oil but no gas, so we'll kind of verify that in a minute or two. All right, inside the box, you're going to find this quick start guide along with your full manual, which you should read that. A lot of good information in there. And then you're going to have this storage hook where you can kind of hook your propane line. That's going to go on your regulator, and there's 4 little screws right there that you can use to attach it to, along with a funnel, and then also a dual USB 12-volt port, which you can plug that into the generator. And on the generator faceplate here, we have the pull cord. And just above that, you'll have your selector switch to go from gas or propane like so. And you slide that collar back and plug in your line. And next to that, that's your choke. You only use that on gas only and not propane. And off, run, and start position on that red switch. And just below that, you're going to have your economy switch back and forth. And so most people run it on economy. And over there, that's going to be basically our battery switch. You turn that on, that allows your electric start to work. And then next to that, you'll see that it has the RV ready 30 amp plug, which is really nice. I like that. Along with some breaker relays there. And then over to the side of that, you see these indicator lights, and that'll show you if you have an overload or low oil. And then your 120 volt plug along with your parallel ports, and then your 12 volt socket down there at the bottom. And then you also have a ground lug that's kind of right there if you want to ground it. Okay, so what we're going to do real quick is take off this panel. This allows us to add the oil to it, and then we're also going to familiarize ourselves with a couple of the components in there. That way, in case you ever have to service it, or if you run into a problem, it's not a bad idea to know where some of the components are in there. And also just to make sure everything's still connected. You never know, upon shipping, it might get loose. So let's get this off real quick. Set this out of the way. What in the heck? Sorry, I lost my cool there for a second. Anyway, let's get back to this. So what we're looking at in here is just a general area of the engine. So there's your carburetor over here that does have a drain screw. So long-term storage, that's what you're going to do with that to get the fuel out. Air filters over here with a little flip switch that'll allow you to get access this way. And then also, let's get that back over there all the way. And then your spark plug boot is right up here. So you'll have to get a little special tool to kind of get in there. And then this little guy here is where we're going to add our oil, and we'll get onto that. So also what's nice about this thing is that they give you a drain tube that you can put it right here. So when you do drain this, all you have to do is kind of tip the generator a little bit. And then basically just put this into a container to catch the oil. And then that makes your services basically really easy. So we'll add the oil here. If you ever want to know anything about your engine as well as like where it came from, where it's manufactured, which was China, you can actually find the little sticker down here and look at the engine family number, and it'll kind of tell you a whole bunch of information. There's a model number that's down here. So let's take a look. Okay, so we'll pop off this little guy here. You can just pop this like so. Don't need the rest of that. Okay, and one thing that you guys should actually read this, because it says no oil in the unit, and it says add oil before starting it and use only 10 weight 30. In the actual manual, though, it says you can use a 530 if you're in a colder area. So it's not a bad idea for extended temperatures. If you're in a really cold climate, then 5 weight might actually be better for you. But a 5 weight 30 would be just fine. And then it also says to make sure you change your oil at least every 100 hours, and you can add an hour meter to these if you want. Or just kind of a general track, but keep track of it. and also just generally check your oil every once in a while. Okay, so it says to use 0.6 quarts. That's about 19 ounces or so. And so basically just put a tape line there. We're going to add the oil in here real quick. That way we can get this thing fired up soon. So you can actually see the oil is right there at the bottom of the threads. So we're pretty much good to go. We'll just even put the dipstick in there real quick, and it is pretty much mostly up that dipstick. If we threaded it all the way, it'd pretty much be full. And you can see there's a full mark right there. Sorry about that right here. You can kind of see that guy there. Kind of give that a little twist there real quick. We'll even check it. Okay, let's get on to the battery. Okay, so now we're going to take off this back door. This is where our battery is located. Alright, this little strap is what holds it in. Pull that off to the side. Lift this guy up and out of the way. And we have a couple cap protectors. We're just going to ditch those off to the side. Okay, so one of the biggest things is that when people take these out and get them ready to use, is nobody's checking the voltage on these things, and they'll sit inside the store for maybe 2, 3, 4 months. And these are just regular lead acid batteries. They're not deep cycle batteries, and you can see right there it is a sealed unit, which is nice, but not being a deep cycle battery, it's not going to last very long. So these are just basically like a lawnmower battery, nothing special. So we'll do a quick volt check just to kind of see where this is. And 12.8 volts would be kind of ideal, maybe 12.7. But we'll take a look, kind of see where we're at. Hopefully you guys can see that. And 12.3, so it is a little bit low. That's about 60% roughly. So we're going to go ahead and charge this up for a couple hours and get it up to a higher voltage, and then we'll kind of come back from there. Okay, so we just pulled this off the charger. We'll take a quick peek. It's probably still going to be very high because it's only been off for about a minute or two. But either way, it's up there. That's good enough to throw it back in and get started. Now, one thing, I don't like having these come from the side, the battery terminals. So I'm actually going to change these out and have them come from the top. After looking at the wiring in there, looks like it might do a little better coming from the top versus the side like this. We're going to take out the little battery terminal block. This is what kind of your screw threads into. Put those like so. Now our wires are kind of tucked up in here, so we just give that a little snap and that'll come out. We're going to scoot these little boots back. Do the same thing on this one, like so. And we'll put our boots back on top there. Now what we're gonna do is just take this guy here, give it a good stretch like so. And then you can just get it right on the little cover or on the hook. And then we'll get our cover back on as like this. And we'll get this thing outside, get it fired up, and start getting this thing broke in. Alright, before we add fuel to this thing, we're going to weigh it real quick. Now it does have the battery in it and it does have oil in it. So we'll give it a couple weighs right here. It is definitely a little bit heavier. Kind of till I get my squats in real quick, and boom, right at 100 pounds even. Pretty impressed that I can still lift that. Yeah. Anyway, so if there was gas in it, obviously you're going to add a few more pounds, but realistically it's going to be over 100 pounds. So, and just to show you a cool little thing on this generator, you see the right side, that's the exhaust. On the left side, there's actually a little kind of a cool, it's actually a heating window, and you can actually use that to heat up your bottle of propane if it happens to get too cold, and it will kind of freeze over. So I'm going to get this thing hooked up, get it ready to fire up. I'm going to do some kind of heat cycles on it, which is when you fire it up, you run it for a couple minutes and then you shut it off, let it sit. I'm not going to show you guys that. That's just kind of a waste. And then I'm also going to add some loads to it off and on. And this is going to take several hours. So we're just going to kind of move along with the test here in a second. But and again, with that cooling window, you can see that a lot of air actually moves out of there, and it's warm air, and you can put your propane bottle there so it doesn't kind of freeze over. And another cool trick here too is that you see the battery is completely disconnected, and if you don't happen to have a battery or it happens to die, you can actually still run this generator on propane. Now, what I did do is I tried to fire it up on gasoline, and it would not budge. It actually says in the manual it won't run on gas, but it will run on propane. As you can see there, it kind of fires right up. So if your battery happens to be dead, it's a nice kind of feature to have. All right, so we'll kind of get over with the testing here. We'll do a sound check real quick. And so basically this is gasoline, and the economy mode is off. And so we're kind of running right about 73.5 dB. And then we're going to do the same thing here again in the economy mode. Kind of see where now claimed weight or claimed dB on this was about 59. And of course there's a lot of variables when it comes to how they do it, how we're doing it, so you know, you might have some variances there. And then the reason I'm doing gas and the propane is because somebody could have swore that, oh, it's a lot quieter when you run it on propane, and I was like, okay, well, why not test it? We'll check it out. But as you can see so far, it's pretty similar. There's not a whole lot of differences. I ended up having some exhaust pops, and so you could see why I would get some spikes in the dB readings there, but for the most part, I kind of just measured this one off and went with 64 dB. And, you know, so as far as the propane being quieter, it didn't really seem like it. It seemed to run smoother on propane, but I did turn the generator away from me because most of the time you're not going to have the exhaust facing you, or depending on where you're at, you're going to be farther away from it. So that's kind of a nicer little range there, 62.5-ish, so not too bad. Okay, so we're going to be using my trailer. This is going to provide us a 30 amp service, so I'm going to be able to use a bunch of different items in there. The air conditioner, I'm going to use a heater, and a few other things. And you can see this is my meter down here, and I kind of built that guy, and I'm running 10 gauge wire through that, so I have plenty of you know, wire to be able to use through this thing. And so currently the only thing running right now is the converter in the trailer. That's the only thing that's on. Everything else is off, and I have some lights on, but that's just going through the DC circuit. So we'll turn on that refrigerator right there. That's going to give us about 300 or so watts, another 2 or 3 amps. And then I'm going to come over here and turn on the AC unit real quick. And right now we are on gasoline, so just to make sure that you guys know. So we'll fire up this guy here. Basically the fan's going to kick on first. You'll see that guy move up. And then all of a sudden the air conditioning is going to kick on here in just a second. And we'll see that guy kind of kick up as so. And so now I'm going to use this heater here and basically turn this up just kind of in stages real quick after the air conditioner kind of normalizes for a second. Turn that up 1 and go to medium, I guess. You see that we're kind of reaching almost our peak amount of amps, getting close to our wattage. Now we'll turn that all the way up there. And so remember, on gasoline, our peak amount of amps is 25.8. And we're already over that by about a full amp. And you can see our running watts is pretty much maxed out at 3100. We'll fire up our outside fridge, drag a little bit more power out of this guy. And that'll kind of go up and down and kind of settle for a second. And so again, 25.8. And what we're going to do is we'll actually multiply our volts. We're going to multiply those amps real quick. You can see that our meter is pretty darn close. It's off by only a little bit, but no reason to damage this thing or anything. But you know, I ran a few more tests and I had it shut off just a little bit higher. It went up to almost 33 and basically stayed there for about 30 seconds, almost a minute, and shut off. So basically now we'll just kind of do the propane test. We'll shut this guy down. We'll rehook up everything, get this thing fired up, and we'll basically do the same test on the propane now, kind of basically in the same order. Alright, so get the AC fired up again, and the converter again is already running. And so remember, with the propane, our amperage and our running watts is lower. Get that out of the way real quick just to back it up. Not that it was really getting warm, it was only on for a few minutes at most anyway. And we'll turn on the refrigerator real quick, add a little bit more there. So you can see how much farther we're past the rated propane amperage is. It's supposed to be at 23.3 if I remember correctly, and 2780 on the watts, and so far it's actually doing really well. I was more impressed with the propane test versus the gas because it went pretty far over what it stated, so I thought that was actually kind of nice. And when I did do the full shutdown on this, it wasn't too much more past where I am now. But yeah, so 2790 watts is rated, and you can see that it's basically running what it does on gasoline, so worked out really good.